Thanks for everybody joining us. We'll give about 30 seconds, but I just wanted to start off, it's good to be back. I appreciate the patience that you had during the time that I couldn't really do these, and I had special guests. My applaud to the special guests that we had. I hope you guys had some stuff information that you got out of that. It's all I could really do to put some people in here to help me out to try to get through here and to get through some of these webinars that I needed to do. But it's good to be back. So this is going to be a short one. We're just going to kind of roll into this, go through some details. I'll just start off by saying I'm not a specialist when it comes to ComCheck. If you're an architect, designer on here, this may be some elementary stuff. But if you're a building official or an inspector, this may be some information that you'll need to look at just to say that you weren't really clear or had clarification that that's really the detail that they have to go through to build these energy models. So we'll get started with this. Again, welcome today. It's the 2021 IECC and ComCheck Basics. As always, today's webinar is being recorded. It will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, which you can find by either searching SPEER on YouTube, or you can go directly to our website at eepartnership.org. And then on that webinar, on our partnership website, you'll see a news section. Under that, you'll find the resources page. That links you directly to our YouTube channel. We have over 150 videos. It's been uploaded there with a variety of topics, things you can do. Unfortunately, you don't get CEUs unless you're at the live version of the webinar. So thanks for everyone joining us today. With that being said, it is eligible for ICC CEUs. You must be present for at least 3/4 of the presentation within 72 hours. Kathy's on vacation, so it may take a little bit longer this time. You'll receive a course evaluation email from Kathy Lawrence. Please complete the survey, give us some feedback, give us some topic ideas of what you might want to see. Send those back to her to receive your course completion certificate, and that will contain the title and course ID that you'll need when you're reporting your CEUs to ICC. Some questions in there, we can answer that at the end of it. Or if it pertains to what we're talking about on the slide, then we can try to go through it at that time. Q&A features open if you want to use the chat for technical difficulties and Q&A for actual questions, but just feel free to put the questions in the chat as well. So thanks again for joining us. As always, housekeeping, we've got, who is SPEER? What do we do? If you're new to us and you're new on our webinars, thanks again for joining us. But we provide training, webinars, in-person, field training, as well as I can do some ICC or the IECC test prep training as well. We can go one-on-one. We can go with a small group. Kind of helps you get prepared for taking the certification test. We're basically on our contracts. We are funded through contracts, so our training is always free. It doesn't cost you guys anything for have us there, either in person or do a webinar or do an in-person field training. I can help answer questions with energy code based on basically any version up to the 21 right now. 24 is not yet out. Also including ASHRAE 90.1. If I don't know the answers, I've got plenty of people that I can reach out to. We've got a list of people that are on these webinars that we have emails to for building officials, CBOs, third-party inspectors. I can reach out to the DOE. I can reach out to PNNL. I can ask specific questions and try to get some of those things answered for you to help you and assist you with this new version. So I'm happy to help any way that I can. We still assist several cities, and we're still doing that and offering our services for adoption of a new code cycle. Right now, we're doing the 2021. When 24 comes out, there are a few cities that look to that are already looking to adopt that in the near future. My contact information will be at the end of this presentation. I've also included some contact information directly to the Energy Star or the energycodes.gov section that you can reach out to for their specific help desk on any questions that you have that may be more detailed than what we're going to go through here today. So now let's just get into this. I mean, this is on you can find this on the internet. There's some updates to it that's probably maybe newer than what I have shown here. But it's now available. There's new ComCheck available. The things that are new on here, you see it on the right-hand side. They're supporting 90.1-2022 now. State-specific codes are also in here. A new one that's really big is a lot of people are finding this very useful is the project sharing. So you just basically add someone in your team or even another company, and you give the email address, and now you guys can share it actively, not downloading a separate version and then telling someone what your changes were. If you change it, it changes it for the other person that you're sharing it with. So it's kind of something you guys can work together with. So a refreshed and new dashboard that's on here with an improved project management. New wizards that are on here for envelope lighting. It's really a lot more intuitive than the older version of that. There's now a mobile app for inspections that actually has the checklists in there. So you can open that on your phone. You can open that on an iPad or any other tablet that you have. You can do that from the field and use that as your checklists. Coming soon to ComCheck-Web will support the 2024 IECC once that's out and released to the public. As I was told, and I didn't really see that that was the case, I thought 21 would be the last. Actually, I thought 18 would be the last for the desktop version, but it looks like 21 is also on the desktop version. But anything going forward is going to be in the newer version of the web. What they want you to do is start using the web and not download it to PC, because this keeps the most up-to-date versions of that. The code is ever changing. We know that. We've seen it happen before. So when things get tweaked, things get adjusted. The code now is more fluid in how they adjust things throughout the 3-year cycle of that code. And so to be more fluid in the changes, it has to be an active version that's online. So as you see at the very bottom though, and I've been toiling around with it for the last couple of days, getting prepared for this webinar, load time delays. As it says, ComCheck-Web is currently experiencing some slower than expected load and response times, and that's still true. It's not bad. It just has the spinning wheel. You have to wait for it to update and change. It's not overly bad, but I did have a section yesterday where I tried to get back into my ComCheck to start getting some more snippets for the webinar, and I couldn't get loaded in. So sometimes you may have delays even trying to get into the software. So just know they are working on that actively. There's bugs on every software that gets updated, so that does happen with this as well. But information that's needed, I mean, this isn't really new to most people, but this is kind of what we're looking at is you need to provide, which 2021 now added this to their checklist as well for information needed for construction docs, and we'll talk about that in a second. But we're just looking at what version of the energy code are you using, what pathway is actually being used to do that. But as we see, and we'll see that in a minute, because I'll go on the live version. I'll actually be logged into my account and go through the ComCheck. You'll see that you can't really specify what path, because ComCheck only really does 2 paths, and we'll see that in just a second. But builder and project location, the area takeoff envelope assemblies, the insulation R values, fenestration performance data is also needed. Of course, exterior wall thermal bridges, interior exterior lighting details, fixture base details. How many fixtures of each do you have? What's the wattage for each fixture? Heating and cooling system details. One more that we'll see when we get to the live version, it digs down even more, is fan efficacy. That's kind of something that's been overlooked a lot with just doing modeling, and now you have to have a fan efficacy. The fan has to be efficient. It can't just be a low CFM fan with high watt draw. It has to meet fan efficacy tables. The new version of the web ComCheck actually checks that, and it tells you that you're either good or you're not good, or you're with a horsepower motor of this size needs to have this much efficiency, and it kind of walks you through and guides you through how you're going to do that. And of course, service water heating details, and then of course the energy credit options, which is a total of 10 points, and it's based on building type and the climate zone that you're actually in. When we see the live version, you'll see it's kind of not granulated enough to just look at a list and go, I'll just pick this one. You just have to select it and then see what points are awarded. And if you don't think that's enough, then you're not really sure why. Is it building type? Is it based on climate zone? So you can search it on the internet. Actually, it's in the book. There's pages. We'll look at it in the book as well, and it breaks down each building type and how much credit you'll get for each measure that you're actually doing. So the steps are the same as it's always been. You start with the project details. You go into building envelope components. You go into lighting and then mechanicals. And then you have the required requirements for the reports and what you're actually needed. So that process still stays the same. Of course, added to that is the credits. The credit system has been there for some time now in several versions of the commercial code. It's actually coming to the 2024 residential part of the code. I think we've talked about that in previous webinars, but that is If you're used to doing mostly commercial, you do a little bit of residential, when 24 hits, you're still going to be having to do this credit system based on the same kind of stuff that the ComCheck or commercials always had to go through as well. So nothing new with that. Keep in mind, of course, as we talk about a lot of this stuff, it is what's written in the book. What I train and what I teach is what is in the book. It's not a specific amended from anyone else. It's not state amended. It's not city amended. It's not a cog amended. It's just this is what it says in the book. So if you're in an area that's different and they have specific amendments, you'll have to address that when you actually get prepared to start developing the project. So that's something that can change. I can help out with that and kind of decipher what it is that they're trying to do with their amendments and help you on the best choice of action on what to pick to go forward to actually be able to address that. Or some of the things will be, and what we've noticed is some cities will have specific amendments, but there's not a way to say in the ComCheck that this doesn't apply. In other words, you have to select something or the model will always fail. So then you kind of have to let the city know that, hey, I selected this, but since it's amended out, then I'm not really taking this. It gets confusing and gets complicated, and that's kind of what we can help with as well. I can be a kind of go between the building official and or the plan reviewers or the permit tech and just kind of ask those specific questions about what it is that they're looking for to move forward in the project. This is kind of a simplified version, but it's just you need to show and demonstrate compliance at the very beginning. That's why you're building the energy model. So you collect the data, you prepare the input, you check the compliance, you get the necessary generated compliance reports that are then turned into the city for permit. And that comes from a builder, an architect, and a designer. I'm not going to try to pull straws out of a bale of hay here, but what you don't see in that list is contractor. So that's something that I've got calls before about this is, are these people allowed to do this model? In my opinion, an HVAC contractor should not be the one doing it. I can't say that they won't, and I can't say that cities they don't allow that. And that's fine if they do. The building official has the final say in who's accepted and doing what. If they show that they demonstrate a really detailed knowledge on doing this, just review what they have and maybe just move forward with it. But having someone do the software, the one that you'll see in a minute when we go to the live version of it, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm plugging numbers in that probably don't make any sense, but I can get to the end, hit compliance, and now I got green check marks everywhere. So I show that I've complied, but I have no idea how I built this. And now I really don't know what I check marked. So that's just to say builders, architect, designers, they will have the necessary knowledge to answer those specific questions to move forward in the software to get a compliance path approval. So then it moves on to plan review, review software inputs, the compliance results, and then of course looking at the mandatory requirements. A lot of those are, and if you're used to doing this, then this is elementary, but if you're a building official and you've never gone through this, it's just a checkbox that says the requirement will be met. And then it gives you a green check mark and says, okay, you're good to go. I have a question here. Hold on one sec. This is good practice for cities to require third parties. Is it good practice for cities to require third party to review submitted ComChecks? You can, and there are some cities that are doing that. And I do think as a city building official or a city itself partnering with a third party to do submittals and have a review, I think it's a fantastic idea. Because it may be done by the builder, it may be done by the architect, but a third-party energy inspector that's knowledgeable and has been trained in building science and actually how to do this software, I think is a great way to do it. So I've had several conversations with people that I know that are building officials that, true, I'll own up, my whole job and my whole business is training energy code. I don't have what a building official needs to know, which is combination inspectors and MEP and working with the mechanicals and looking at electrical and looking at plumbing. So once you get to the energy code, it becomes, well, that's just more complicated than what I want to look at. I don't really know what any of that really means. So I'll just say it's insulated. Let's move forward. You're good. Well, that's not what the energy code's intended to be used as. And it almost leans heavily on the fact that you need someone else that's more versed in this, has been trained in this, and is certified by another organization that has oversight. Just like TDLR and the plumbing industry, mechanical, electrical industries, they oversee the installers and the techs. You have the same thing happening with third parties. There is somebody that oversees them and goes through QA, QC a lot of times in what they do. So they know what they're doing. They can give you good feedback. And of course, you can use them as a starter. Just say, hey, help my staff understand how to read this and what it is I need to look for to say that is wrong. And then once you get to that point, you may just say, okay, thanks for your time. Thanks for your service. We'll reach out to you if you have any other problems. Or just develop a direct channel that it goes from a permit tech, it goes to plan review, and then someone sends an email off to that third party to actually do ComCheck reviews. That's the great way to do it. So good question. I appreciate that. Thank you. And of course, the energy codes now that we're going through and what it actually has in the new version, you can see here, I'm not going to read all of them, but they have the pre-2013s, 90.1s. Now we have all the way up to the 2022 and the appendix from 90.1. And then, of course, now we have the 2021 IECC. And of course, looking forward, we will eventually see the 2024. This says towards the end of 2024. It may be even further out than that because the books have not yet hit the street. As we see in the very bottom, though, it says for the IECC component performance alternative, and then it kind of says it's a hybrid total UA method. So it's basically just giving us a shell, an outer envelope total UA trade-off and performance model. It's not a simulated performance with mechanicals and lighting and all that being added in. It's just looking at total UA when it looks at the building shell itself. So this kind of better explains it a little bit. You've got compliance methods. Of course, as always, you'll have envelope, HVAC, water heating, power, lighting, and then other. They all have mandatory provisions. But under compliance options, as you see the little box with a check mark, and it has the city grid that's showing, it will cover prescriptive option and trade-off options. That's the UA trade-offs. It will not do a complete energy cost budget performance that's simulated. That will take additional software to get to that, like an Ecotrope, a rim rate, or even another more detailed commercial-driven software. But you'll have to show compliance with that. And where that gets into a little sticky of the weeds is just like the person that asked a second ago. Well, if I suddenly am used to looking at ComCheck and you get used to doing this, and then someone throws you a curveball and gives you an Ecotrope report, are you prepared to read through that and figure out what it is that it's saying? You could clearly just go to the bottom of the report and say, well, it says it complies. Let's just move forward. They obviously know what they're doing. There may be some really big anomalies in there that is not supposed to be, or they've just checked like I did. I just put a checkbox on everything and most of it says the requirement will be met, but the builder's not doing that. The developer or the designer or construction site is not having those products or those materials, or those things are not being installed. It was just an energy model that was showing compliance, but it is not being built that way. So right now there's still two active versions on the internet. Starting with all this over a month ago and started working through it, I was in the wrong one, and I kept building it and learning and saying, this looks really cool. I like the streamline of it. And then suddenly I realized that I was in the wrong one. So if you see here, it says start ComCheck-Web, and at the very bottom, it says try new ComCheck-Web. The new one at the bottom is the one that we're working with today. The older one that's there is just a ComCheck-Web. And it, in my opinion, and what I've been told, is it will not really be effective going forward. It's going to be the new one. So to get to the most up-to-date, latest versions of what's needed for compliance, you're going to be using the one at the bottom. And of course, I went ahead and did some screenshots. The top one here is what I was working on. To me, it looks like it's newer and it's more streamlined, but that's the older version. The bottom one is the newer version. It puts the menu off to the left instead of the tabs across the top. It's bigger text. It's easier to read. but to me, it just looked like an older version, and it wasn't. But what's good to point out here is at the upper left corner of that new one, you have a help center now, which before the older one didn't have this. You had to try to find someone to reach out to by email or phone call. Here, and I've highlighted it off to the left, is you've got a getting started section. It's just a couple of pages of how you create a login and how you start to build a project. And then you have a specific user guide. And these things, a lot of times when you're using those user guides, it's easy to just to be able to do a control F and then just put a keyword in and go straight to what you're looking for instead of having to dig through everything. They're not very long. They're not very detailed. There'll be things that you won't find information, like I did the keyword search of credit and nothing pulled up. So it's not detailed enough to go through each credit to explain to you what it is that each credit means and how many points that you'll be awarded. Then you have troubleshooting and helpful hints. Again, that's only 2 pages. And then glossary, of course. Now you have what's that word mean? If you're new to this and you're just learning and this is not normally what you do, and you look at that and there's a word that you're not sure of, the glossary is right there. Before, you just had to go, well, I have to go back to the code book. I have to search this. I have to look for that. They just added helpful little links that directly opens up a user guide in troubleshooting. And I'll look at that in just a second when we go to the live version. You'll see what those troubleshootings look like. So of course, it's based on, I just put on here envelope questionnaire, because the minute you start breaking this down into plan review, air leakage, insulation, fenestration, and post construction, you're basically just answering questions. But answering questions, as I said earlier, I put a check mark on it just to get a green box so I can move forward to see if the compliance would pass. And so, but you have to read that. It gives the specific section of the book, and it starts explaining to you, kind of what it is that you're looking for. But the user guide actually opens each one of those sections deeper. And as you see on the screen, air leakage, the very first one, C402.5.1.1, it kind of gives a better description about what it is that you're looking for. And it can also do mechanicals. It shows you what each different one looks like. What's a heat pump? How would you choose that? Motor horsepower. It goes into a lot more detail, and we'll see that in just a second. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and switch the screen. You guys will see that in a minute. We'll just jump to the live version of the code. So here's just the live version of the code, what we're going through with this. As we see this help centers here, I only really just opened the user guide. This can go into wall type and doors. So if I wanted to do a control F and just type the word door, there's 26 references to this, and you can just walk through it and find what it is that you're looking for. But it helps you decide what it is that you're doing. There's so many new products that come out all the time that you don't really sometimes know. It's a limited category in how you can select what you need to put. You almost have to start looking in and deciding, well, which one of these best match what I currently have with the product that I'm looking at. So you have to try to, you have to try to make a decision as to what it is that you're looking at. So it's easy to do a control F and just do a find, and it helps you dig deeper into what it is that you're looking for. As you see here, heating equipment types, it breaks everything down into what it is that you're looking at. Just looking at like a single package vertical unit, it's a factory assembled single package heat pump, which contains cooling components. So it breaks it down into that. And then I'll look at the code book in just a second, but we'll talk about the software. So I just did a project. I just called it test project. It's in Dallas. It lists it now as in climate zone 2. You can pick new construction, existing, additions, alterations, and then of course pick the energy code that you're looking at. What's new to this also is features. Is it an all-electric property? Does it use renewable energy? This isn't asking for, hey, I'll tell you how many points you get. It's just saying, are these things going to be on site when this project is done and completed? So EV charging, battery storage, heat pump installed. And of course here it says efficiency compliance options. Energy credits can be specified in the credits tab. So it's just giving you that part of it. But at the top, you'll see where it just basically clearly shows you, if once you do a save and you're building your project and you hit compliance, it'll keep track as to which categories are at what percentage of meeting that code. So right now I have 0 for building envelope. I have 100% lighting, and I've got 91% on, I think that's mechanicals. Maybe, I think that's exterior lighting. Yeah. And so the building areas at the bottom, of course, again, everything's based on what type of building. Of course, multifamily is an option that you can choose. Whoops. So if you're adding a building area, you've got different options that you can choose to add that. That sometimes is not as easy as it sounds. You're not really sure what fits here, and if it's, if it's an unconditioned space, well, if it's unconditioned but you're adding conditioning, what changes that? If you change a use type on it, where do you go from there? And of course, multifamily can be listed as non-residential or residential. I just rounded it to 100,000 square feet to start the project. And then you move on into envelopes. This is where I was telling you, these all have specific checklist items that you're looking at that you're just check marking, but they break down into, sometimes they'll have more definition or more choices. This one specifically just says the requirements will be met, but you have to put a plan reference page. So on the report, when the city gets the report, they'll know exactly what page this requirement is being referenced to look at in plan review. So again, I'm probably telling people that already know this by heart and they do it all the time, but it's just, this is new stuff and how they've structured it differently in the new ComCheck, which I think makes it cleaner and more understandable on how that it's being done. And of course, insulation, exterior insulation protected against damage, sunlight, moisture, wind. You can select here. Again, it's just requirements being met. But then it also gives exceptions down here. You can do the exceptions to where a requirement does not apply. And of course, it'll give you a check mark at that time. Or you can say on this one specifically, it's heated slab on grade as an exception for that, so you don't have to take that. So fenestration and post-construction, you just start building the project with this. Lighting, the way they've set it up, I think makes a whole lot more sense than it was. You're just going to build the fixture and use a fixture schedule. You'll build each fixture telling what type of lighting that it is, the fixture wattage that it is. And once you set that up and you've actually put it in there, now you've got the fixture added. So now when you're actually doing a fixture or doing lighting, you're going to add to the lighting, and then you'll select the fixtures that are listed. Again, that's probably not anything new that you don't already know happens, but I'm just going into a high level portion of this for the detail that's happening. But you've got plan review. So each section now has plan review, post construction, controls. This is one thing, in my opinion, is kind of it's almost a guessing game as to whether or not the cities are going to enforce this. This does get, in my opinion, and in most people's opinion, it gets more technical with the, do I really need occupant sensors everywhere? With commercial, of course, it's easier to say than residential, but now that that's in residential, it's always a guess of, I'm not going to enforce that because that to me doesn't make any sense. But in commercial, it makes a lot of sense to not have things on all the time when people aren't there. So controls, you have to pick, it goes specifically to occupant sensors in specific areas, and then occupant sensors in warehousing, and occupant sensors in office areas. So it's not, are you just meeting for the whole building itself? You're just meeting lighting controls. It's each specific different section of the building needs to have its own specific requirement when it's based on lighting controls. And then of course the wattage. With that, just compliance, the requirements are being met. There's probably a lighting schedule that's on the plan review. I just put on here, it's 5A on the page. But then it also tells you, you've got building type listed here, but you got space by space method. You've given you the allowable wattage based on building type and size. It's giving you the allowable wattage. And then it's keeping track with every time you add one, what's the proposed wattage and what you're looking for to meet compliance with that part of it. Exterior lighting, same kind of thing. You're building each fixture. You're going to look at it from that point. You're going to tell it what zone it's actually in. I just threw numbers out here and just said, look, it's area 10 and its lighting density and power is 14. Its proposed wattage is 45. Target wattage is 140. I have one fixture. So I just added some of these in here just so we could pick that and see what it looks like. But at the bottom, again, it's keeping track of total allowed wattage, the tradable wattage of what you can trade off. And then, of course, it looks at proposed and how much you're actually proposing here, what's actually being traded off. So it's keeping track of that. But again, at the bottom, now that's opened up another section that you've got to answer questions based on what it is that you're doing and what it is that you've selected. So automatic lighting controls for exterior installed. With this, it's got exceptions in here. It's also got just requirements will be met, and you give a reference to that. And of course, like interiors, we now have controls for exterior as well, which talks of the same way. You're getting wattages. The controls on that are based sometimes on, as it said earlier, it's based on sections that you're in. With this one, it's just talking about automatic lighting controls on exterior is installed. And of course, it's based on reducing the lighting by 30% or more. So then you've got requirements here that are exceptions and requirements met with that part of it. You can specify it by different zone types, like what it is that you're looking at. Is it in a high activity metropolitan commercial district? Of course, it's basing it in parentheses. That's kind of specific to that. An unspecified location, an other location. You just kind of pick what it is that you're looking at, which now will bring in some more decisions maybe that had to be made based on what zone this actually is. And the mechanicals look almost the same thing, but now we've got HVAC system, fan systems. That's where you're looking at from each zone for a fan. What's its efficacy from that part of it? For HVAC, you're just going to develop each unit. The capacities, again, I just threw numbers in here. These probably don't really make sense to some. And then, of course, where is it located? With the cooling equipment, when you built that, or when I built it, it's basically asked, was it in a room AC with louvered sides or without louvered sides? So you're getting into more granulated detail when you're building this energy model from that part of it. There is help menus here. Just kind of hover over it. It just kind of tells you a little thing like this says fan system screen is used to define and determine. It doesn't really help decide what it is that you're picking. It just tells you what it is that this one section is trying to do. But it's easy enough. I like the setup. I'm not used to the older version, but the newer version, I like the setup of just answering the questions about plan review, just answering the questions about post-construction, just answering the questions about HVAC. Instead of having all these listed in just a running list, this breaks it down into which category you're looking at. So to me, this makes more sense. It's better clarification on all of that. And you've got plant, same kind of things here. I've not specified anything, so it will give you a warning in the very beginning that says you need to specify and add a plant before you answer these and have specifics. With that part of it, I mean, there's no specific because there's nothing that's actually created. And then water heating, I just created a storage tank of 30 gallons electric. Again, just threw a number in there for kilowatts. That's not accurate. But you can continue to add water heaters. You give a description to each one. Is it instantaneous? Is it a storage water heater? If it has additional equipment that's added to it, then you configure the water heater, and then you add that, and then you pick each one that's based on which zone that those things are in as well. And then requirements, it goes into specific on the project of same kind of thing. You're just looking at, are the requirements being met? Do you have exemptions or exceptions that are on here where you don't have to actually do it? Then you've got post-construction details as well that you have to answer. As I said earlier, though, there's a lot of specific stuff based on receptacles and controlled receptacles and controlled lighting and wattage drops and things like that needs to be looked at and to say, do I meet this or do I meet an exception? And then it won't let you get a green. If I check this box here, it still doesn't give me a green check mark until I give it a reference point. Once I give it a reference page or section, now it is complete. So I have to match this up with what's on the plans and what's in the design for that. Then, of course, you have the mandatory additional efficiency packages. This kind of breaks it down into a little bit more. It's only hitting 4, but there's more that you can get, and we'll look at it in the next tab is credits. But you have 5% cooling efficiencies. You have on-site renewable energy credits, dedicated outdoor credits, and then enhanced envelope performance as well. And as it says here, building thermal envelope UA value is basically greater than or equal to 15% better. And another way to say that is you're 85% or less on compared to the total UA version of this. So that's what's considered an enhanced envelope performance. In other words, it's met code, but you've done better than that, and you're going to call it an enhanced envelope performance. But you have to get into details in the design of how are you going to achieve that. And that's where a plan reviewer would be looking at to say, okay, they've listed that this is how they're going to do this, and this is the credits they're going to get, and this is the mandatory efficiency package they're going to select. But how are they getting there? And then the inspector on site is going to have to go ensure that those things specifically are being installed or installed in the manner that they should be to meet this enhanced envelope performance. It's easy to select envelope performance and get a lot of points and then just not really do it. That's the kind of quirk of what I've been seeing and getting a lot of calls for is, look, we passed the plan review. We went through plan review. Everything was fine. And now somebody, either a third party saying it's wrong and we don't understand why. It's probably because they didn't build to the model. They did it for permit only, check marking boxes to make sense so they can get a compliance. And then they just installed how they normally do or the products they normally use. And it's not really meeting the requirement of what they checked off. So that's how it's getting more complicated when it comes down to the city inspector or building official in the field doing inspections. It's really hard to determine, did they meet that enhanced envelope performance? And what does that actually mean? In other words, what am I specifically looking for when I'm in the field? Another question, can all of these items be checked at final, or is a rough inspection? That's a great question. Some of these are going to have to be verified before drywall. Enhanced envelope performance, that will have to be done, in my opinion, before insulation. But depending on what type of insulation they're using, it could be after insulation, but before sheetrock. Are they actually meeting that? But again, that comes back to what products are they using or what method are they using to meet that requirement. If it's all mostly outer shell insulation and air sealing details, they could possibly go all the way up to cladding to verify this. And then you verify it before cladding goes on, or brick or stone, or the facade goes on from the front of the building. But whatever components make up this enhanced envelope performance has to be verified before it's covered up. One way that we do it in residential is, even if you didn't see it and you didn't actually look at the envelope, but once I do a blower door test, it will tell me if that envelope is good. It's going to tell me that it doesn't have holes in it. It's going to tell me that I meet compliance. It's not that easy when you get to commercial, because most of the time commercial buildings will not be using a blower door to verify your air barrier. It's easy to do on residential, because now we can test it and say, well, you have a threshold to get to, and it has to be that or better. And so once I run the blower door, if it comes in at 3 ACH, then you must have done something right. It's not that easy in commercial, and you're mostly doing a visual verification of A, the product being installed, and B, is it following manufacturer's instruction detail, and C, did they actually do that and not destroy it during time of construction because one person did the whatever air barrier, house wrap, or a roll-on membrane. They've done that, but now you've got a plumber that's come in to correct some things and they've punched holes through it. You got to verify that to make sure, is that upholding that? And you're not able to verify it at final with the blower door in most cases. So great question. Yeah, I would try to do that before it gets covered up, and majority of all of this stuff. Of course, you get a checklist that says post-construction. You know, if you're looking at motor horsepower or light fixtures and all controls, all that's going to be done at time of CO inspections or just before that. But when you're looking at envelope improvements or insulation improvements, those things need to be looked at. But also, if you're trying to hit 10% better on cooling equipment, they can model it with 10% better equipment that's not what they're specifically forced to install. So if you go out on site and you have availability to look at this ComCheck report and you can see a specific model number listed on the plans, just look at it before sheetrock goes up and to see, are these pancake units that are listed, they're up in the ceiling, if they're going to be covered up. It's easier now. Let's just verify what they're installing is actually what they've planned to install, because they can change it at any time. And sometimes it's not their fault. Sometimes it's the supply house was short on some of them. They had to go with a different version. Well, that may change output capacity. They might change. It probably shouldn't, but sometimes it can, and they may do it on just a few units and not all. So verifying model numbers to me is a key item that is just you just have to do it. If you don't do it, then you're not doing your due diligence to make sure they're complying with what they've told you they were going to do. And then credits with this. Right now, I went ahead and just selected a few of them. We'll look at this in a second, but I have a question. Again, I don't build these models. I don't know where the triggers are. I don't do this on a regular basis. But what I got confused by was, if you look at the code book, and I'll flip over to that here. If you look at the code book, this is the specific additional efficiency requirement credits. And it puts it in building type, and then it goes by climate zone. So if I'm looking at a 10% cooling efficiency improvement for building group B, well, I have every single climate zone gives me some kind of credit. And so I kept looking at all of these for group R and group I still get points in every climate zone. And then group E, I still get points in every climate zone for 10%. In group M, I get points, except for one specific climate zone, I still get points. Everything gives me points. However, when I was building the model and I selected 10% cooling efficiency improvement for a multifamily residential style building, and I hit updates, I still didn't get any points. And I don't know why that is. And I'll probably reach out to someone that can help me answer that question. But in my opinion, looking at the code book, everything deserves a point. But this doesn't give me any points. So I'm not really sure. And this is the hiccups that I'll get phone calls about is, look, we're trying to select this and it's not giving us any points. What can I do? At this point, there's not really a driver of, well, I need to reach out to PNNL or DOE and ask that specific question as to, look, I'm doing a multifamily in climate zone 2. It's listed as residential. I'm trying to get improvements or credits for doing cooling efficiency improvements, and it's not giving me that. Is it a quirk in the software? Is it a bug? Or is it doing that because there's something I'm missing that maybe that code book isn't updated to say that that specific climate zone? But you would think climate zone 2, any improvement to cooling will get points. But even if I went with 5 and let it update, I still don't get any points. So we're in a cooling predominant. So if I do any kind of improvements, I should be getting something. But as my project sits right now, I'm required to do 10 credits. I've only got 8. And the only way I got 8 was to do on-site renewable energy. If I did the enhance, and I'm also selecting enhanced envelope performance. My thing would be is, if you're building an energy model and you're saying that you're doing it, but you're not getting points for it, do you just not do it? That's kind of a deciphering of, you're looking at how this is being built. If you're not getting any value for that, I mean, yeah, in my opinion, you're getting value because you're enhancing the envelope performance of a commercial building. But if you're doing that to get credits and points, and it's not giving you anything based on your climate zone, is it worth the squeeze to do it? That's how you can build different models and list it with different options of credits to say what's going to be the most cost-effective way for me to do this and still obtain 10 points. In climate zone 2, if I went 10% heating, I know it's not going to get me anything because we're not a dominantly heating climate, because we're mostly cooling. So increasing the heating efficiency and going with a 90+ furnace isn't going to get me anywhere. Going with the heat pump and trying to do that for heating only, not cooling, isn't going to get me anything in this climate zone. You go further north, then you're going to have credits for that. As you can see with this is if I go with heating improvements, the colder the climate, the more the points awarded. Same thing with cooling, the warmer the climates, the more points are getting awarded. But what I think is missing is a link in the software that opens these pages based on building type, and maybe that's to come. It's just not in there yet. So I'm going to speed through this real quick. We're going to go through the 2021 stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish out with this. If you have specific questions about this, by all means, reach out to me. I've got guys that can help me with that. Maverick says, do you have any recommendations for when the city amendments are less stringent than ComCheck requirements? Should code values be used and submit a letter of explanation? Maverick, I would say yes. That's what we talked about a second ago. If I'm having to select something that's been specifically amended to be either less stringent or not existent at all through the city, like some cities are removing additional efficiency requirements. But if I have to select this to get the model to say pass, to get compliance reports, you're going to have to write a letter or something's going to have to explain the discrepancy to say, this is why this model says this is because y'all are not requiring me to do this, but I have to select that for the software. So yeah, great point with that. And then the last one I'll just go through is just the compliance part of it. Which that brings up another point real quick, and I'll say that I do have someone reached out to me today about a city specific that this doesn't have anything to do with ComCheck, but just for an example, less stringent code. The city has adopted 2021 Energy Star right now for Texas on residential. It has a backstop of 2012, not 21. But if the city's now adopted 21, they want this builder to use a newer version of Energy Star because the backstop matches what they've amended. That's not really what's required and needed to do. I guess the city has authority to do that, but by the legislative correction of House Bill 3215, it says that the Energy Star 3.1 is allowed in Texas as a compliance pathway, and it doesn't specify over what code version. Maybe they'll correct that in the new legislative session. I don't know, and they'll add some language to that to say it needs to be better than whatever the state adopts. It needs to be better than that. Even if the state adopts 2018, the 3.1 still is less than that. So maybe, I'm not sure. And then of course, at the very end, you have compliance results. It shows building envelope compliance. I'm still at 0. Lighting is 100%. It gives me a breakdown of that. And then exterior lighting compliance check, I'm at 91% of that. But there are errors at the bottom. And of course, there's nothing you can click. You just have to read it. It says building credits are below minimum. As we saw earlier, I'm at 8 points. I need 10. So it's telling me there's an error here. So I'm not able to get that compliance. So now let me go back to this. And we'll get into the energy code. We've gone through this before. But just we'll just go through the highlights for the rest of this presentation. We'll go through some highlights of the 2021. We talked about it a second ago, kind of the information that's needed to build an energy model. This is the information this is kind of a short list or a list of information needed for construction documents. But as we see the ones in red, they've added, tell me which energy compliance pathway is being used. That needs to be something specific in your plan review department to say, that's one of the few things that you're going to have to verify. And what that's also going to tell is how the inspector in the field is going to look at this project. Because if you do prescriptive, you can easily have a code book in your truck and you're looking at it verbatim out of the book. If it says total UA trade-offs, that book kind of goes out the window. You have some mandatory things, but you can't specifically tell, is it meeting it without looking at the report and seeing the details as to what's been traded off. Another question says, are credits required? The answer to that is by code book, they are in all building types and all pathways used for compliance. As I said a second ago, there are some specific cities that are amending out that requirement. That's up to each city to do. We are a home rule state. They can decide on how they want to amend the code. Some people look at it and say, well, the 2021 IECC is a model code for us to build off of. And if you use it that way, then you amend it how you see fit for your constituents and your building industry that's in your community. So are credits required? Yes. By the book, all of them are required on any building type. And you have to hit 10 points. And that normally will always take at least 2 different options to get you to 10 or more points based on your climate zone. If you do 10% cooling efficiency improvements in climate zone 1, you're probably 10 points and you're already there and you're done. But if you're in climate zones 3, you're going to get maybe 6 points, maybe 8 points, and you're going to have to add another option to get you over that hump of 10 points. So yes, they are required. And then insulation, that's still the same. At the very bottom, we've got location of now daylight zone needs to be on the floor plan. And now in the 2021, daylights are broken into top light, side light zones, making up the daylight zones, and the percentage and square foot of each one needs to be listed in detail on the plans. And as we said a second ago, in the enhanced performance of the air barrier or building shell, it's specify what you're using in material to make up the air barrier and the air sealing details on how it's going to be installed, and include the location of where that is for each specific material on your plans for plan review. So just because you're saying it's OSB and house wrap, are those two things going to be together and in the same location? Or are you using house wrap? And I'm just throwing this out there. I know this doesn't make any sense, but house wrap just after insulation on the studs, and then you're using OSB over the top of it. It's where are these things located, and maybe having a sectional of the plans to show specifically what it is the inspector needs to look for when he's on site. And of course, low energy buildings and greenhouses is now here. They did a little bit of adjustments to low energy buildings. In the previous code versions, they had a requirement of 3.4 BTUs or 1 watt per square foot less. Now they've added one that just says if it doesn't contain the conditioning, like heating or cooling, then it's considered a low energy building and does not have to comply with the code. So I've had someone call me with one that was a small event center. And that event center was not going to be conditioned, but they insulated it. So the city said, well, if you're insulating it and it has doors, then you need to condition it. I'm not trying to make their call of, does a city have the authority to say that has to be conditioned? This had big roll up overhead doors that will be rolled up. And then afterwards, they did mention to the city they were going to add a couple of window units to keep it more comfortable. Of course, that changes everything. Now it says, okay, then that's a conditioned building that now must comply with the energy code. Before, it doesn't need to comply because it's not being conditioned. It doesn't matter if it has, 65 lights in it. You can do a lighting schedule and get that approved through the city. But as far as energy code goes, you don't have to comply with the energy code if it's not being conditioned. But even adding window units, that's a plugged in appliance that can be removed, not a permanent fixture. So now is it considered permanently conditioned? It was a tough call. I tried to help her and walked her through how to do a ComCheck. And once she did the ComCheck and she gave it to the city, then they approved it and moved forward and said, okay, we're good to go here, because it was considered a low energy building at that time. So it's just the call of the cities. And then greenhouses, it spells all that out. We're seeing more and more of that happen when you have dense population with grow houses for either for municipals or tomatoes or, perishable good foods that are actually being done under roof. These things are becoming more popular in highly densely populated cities. And of course, the R value table, the majority of changes on that's been across the board in every climate zone. So a lot of it is just increased in insulation. There are some that have adjusted just for better clarification to be less. Again, as we're seeing codes being adopted, I have seen cities will specifically amend their own climate zone out for insulation in your area to be less than code. So an example of we see attic and others says 38. The city may amend that out and say 30. The problem becomes, I get that you're doing that from a city standpoint, and you have every right and jurisdictional authority to actually amend that. But how do you get ComCheck to understand it to give a pass? So now when I turn this in for plan review, it's going to say it doesn't comply. And the reason it doesn't comply is because I'm only doing 30, because you're allowing me to do 30, but the software is telling you you have to do 38 or better. And it becomes an explanation of, you need to explain this. As Maverick asked earlier, would you put a letter together showing the discrepancies? I actually would, yes. Most buildings are required to have a freeze protection heaters. Yeah, that's another one that came up. We found these buildings to be conditioned due to energy use. Absolutely. So if you're just doing sprinklers only and you're putting in a heater for to keep it from freezing, depending on the size of the building, you may run over that energy usage, and now it's considered conditioned. I know sometimes, and I've had several calls with people reaching out going, look, I'm a designer in North Carolina. We've never had this come up before, but now, X, Y, and Z city wants me to insulate the walls, but we didn't plan to do that. And the project it wasn't bidded. There wasn't a bid process of that to be done. It's overrunning in costs because of the freeze protection. All I can say is, if the building's big enough and you can use that heater that's going to meet the requirement to keep it from freezing, and the wattage and energy usage is low enough that the 3.4 BTUs or 1 watt per square foot limit is not exceeded, it's still considered non-conditioned building and doesn't have to comply. Once you've gone over that, all bets are off. Everything, depending on whatever the city makes you do, everything's going to have to be meeting the energy code, and that means insulating it and getting credit points, and it just becomes more complicated. That's why having a third party in there to say, let's work through this and try to pick the right model of equipment to not have to have that. But as Maverick was stating a second ago, they do a lot of third party commercial stuff, and 9 times out of 10, it's going to exceed that energy use, and once it does, it becomes part of the energy code and needs to meet that requirement. There is a new kind of a section here. I've never seen it be used. I know there's product out there that can. This picture here doesn't do it justice, but airspaces do contain an R value if it's closed off from being ventilated. It can't. This is showing a drainage plane behind a brick. That's not really an airspace that can be used as an R value because air is allowed to move through it. If it's an enclosed airspace and has minimal airflow in and out, and it's designed properly, you can use the airspace R value in your computations when you're doing the R value needed for your climate zone. We talked about this a second ago, but daylight zones need to be listed on your plans, but now you've got side light and you've got top light, and they all work their way into daylight, but now you have daylight responsive controls. So they've added a requirement number 3, which is daylight responsive controls are installed in daylight zones. So now each daylight zone needs to have it. And I've got, you've got number 1, which are buildings greater than 2 stories, not less than 50%. Buildings that are 3 stories or more, not less than 25%. Number 3 was added to say daylight responsive controls are installed in daylight zones. So again, I say it with what it says in the code book. I'm not going to talk about specific amendments from each city. That may change. And then operable openings. I like to show this one, but because there's a lot of things happening around me where new retails are going in with restaurants that have roll-up doors for sports bars and things like that. You now have to have the HVAC tied to it. So when you're looking at it for plan review, you got to ask, where are the controls for this? I don't see that on your plan. You have roll-up doors. Where are the HVAC controls to adjust it when it's open based on the temperature outside? And then when you're in the field and you're doing inspections, you need to find those controls. Are they set up? You're not going to run them and say, do they actively work? You're going to leave that to a technician that's installed it. And I guess you're going to hope for the best that they actually installed it correctly. And then it's actually set up correctly and commissioned. But those are the things they'll have to look for. And then occupant sensors and warehousing. There's a lot of warehousing happening around North Texas, Central Texas, a lot of warehousings, different aisles, multiple aisles. You have to have each aisleway needs to be controlled by sensors and lightings. Those kind of things need to be looked at. But again, you're looking at it from a plan review standpoint, and then the inspector's got to go find these things and make sure that they're installed properly. light reduction controls. I won't go through all of that. We're kind of running up on time. I went longer on the software part of that, but just talking about where we're not provided with occupant sensors. Now you have general lighting shall be provided with light reduction controls, but there's a lot of exemptions that are here that you might be able to meet. But that's what you're going to look at when you're doing ComCheck is which exception did they check? And if they didn't, and then that means you need to find where are those controls on the plans? Where does it state on here that I need to look for that when I'm on site doing the inspections? And automatic receptacles, this has been I don't know, I just you'd say a thorn in the side with a lot of people that they just don't see the need for this. And a lot of cities I've seen, they've just struck this out and said, we're not going to require automatic receptacle controls because it's basically a provision that says at least 50% of the receptacles and 25% of branch are automatically controlled receptacles. So it's kind of blurry, but you see here one has like a little Wi-Fi signal on it. That means that that is controlled. So at a specific time that will turn off. A lot of that's in common areas, in lobbies, in places that people can just sit and plug in chargers. So if a charger's in the wall, eventually this plug will just shut off. And so it can either be half of each plug or it can be every other plug, meaning 50%. But you're going to look for that on plan review. And then when you're on site, you have to look for, are these actually controlled and where are the controls that control that? How is it being controlled? Is it timer? Is it based on outdoor lights? Something like that. Another one that's also looked at from kind of a frowning face is the energy monitoring. You get a lot of points if you go and add these energy monitoring stuff. You almost finish your points in every climate zone if you add energy monitoring, but it's not an inexpensive way of doing it. There's new equipment that comes out all the time that actually helps add to this. But if you're looking at it from a retail standpoint, someone's building the shell, and that's another question we didn't really discuss, but I can help that. If you wanted to reach out, we can go talk about specifics. But is it, if you're looking at a plan review and the developer is putting a permit in for just the shell and it's going to be full of tenants, are you looking at it from, let's just say, skylight standpoint? Are you looking at making the whole building shell is required to have X amount of square feet of skylights? But if you look at it from a tenant standpoint, that's under the requirement of having to have a skylight because the tenant itself is too small. But at the time of when you're doing permitting, it's just for the building shell. You're going to require the building itself to meet those requirements. It doesn't matter about a future tenant. And that's kind of how it spells that out in the code book. But a lot of people kind of argue against it. Same thing with this energy monitoring. If you're looking at a strip center, and let's say it's 25,000 square feet or greater, but each tenant is going to be less than that, well, can you get credit for that? I don't know. That's the things you have to discuss and look at and talk about. But energy monitoring, those are big points that you get, big credit points. We already talked about this. We looked at it from the code book, so I'll just span through this real quick. But it talks about each one. We just kind of spelled that out a second ago. But tenant spaces, it says tenant spaces shall comply with sufficient options from each specific table to achieve a minimum. So now all of a sudden, the building has gotten 10 points, and now each tenant space needs to also get credits. Again, this is where people just look at it and go, this is getting out of control. It's getting out of hand. It's, I understand the complaints. I understand the kind of the rolling of the eyes to say this is getting kind of on the ridiculous, but almost every equipment we have now, including lighting and switches and mechanicals, they're about as efficient as technology can get without overly spending. What's the next step? You enhance the envelopes. You reduce the time of the lighting that's being used. It's already high efficiency, but you're going to reduce the time it's actually working to reduce energy consumption. That's all this is about, is just adding additional features that reduce the time it's being used. I understand it's super efficient. I understand it's the best that money can buy right now. But if you just cut that time by a quarter or 25%, your still result is you're reducing energy consumption. And that's kind of where the future of the code's going is. You've already been required to have high efficiency stuff. Now just lower its usage. And if you're going to have high efficiency equipment, the only way you lower usage is to tighten the envelope. So if you do enhanced envelope performance, then your equipment doesn't run as long. So you're just kind of getting that less energy. And that's how they look at it is the enhanced envelope performance is you're tightening the envelope, which will have the conditioned space stay longer conditioned, which isn't going to make these systems run again and again and again. So all these things tie back to you're just looking at lowering energy consumption. And then the total building performance code requirements applicable for total building performance paths are outlined in a new user-friendly table to reduce code application confusions. Again, it comes down to the how you want to say it is it's either better than 15% or it's under 85% of the referenced building. So that's another way to look at it to go, I know you're building it by a performance model, but your annual energy cost needs to be equal to or less than 85% of the standard reference building, which is a virtual project that the house has or the building is inside the software. You're just comparing it to a code compliant building and you're comparing to what you're building to that code compliant building that's in the software. And if you're not 85% or better, you're not complying with code. So there is still requirements. Even if you go total building performance, there are some mandatory sections. We've talked about this in previous webinars is the word mandatory has kind of been removed from the code. It's gone to tables, which in my opinion is better clarification, easier to read. You don't have to search for the word mandatory on a section. You just look at a table. But that's helpful also in plan review. Look at the tables and then know that you need to find each one of these because they're mandatory. It has to be done. And then to wrap this up, again, thanks for joining us. Wrapping this up, this is their BECP resource hub that's new. You can find it by going to training.energycodes.gov. There's additional ComCheck training, ResCheck training that you'll find on that. They're trying to pull all the information for either from the RIOs like us or other entities. They're pulling that information onto one hub that's the Building Energy Code hub that actually has all the training stuff. So they also have webinar series that you can join. Here's more information here that you can get with that is the Building Energy Codes program. So it's energycodes.gov. And then you get technical assistance help desk as well. And just remember, there's a lot of people trying to learn this new one. They have a lot of questions. Sometimes you may get in a queue and you're in there on hold for quite a while. But if you ever want to reach out to me, by all means, here's my contact information. If you want to, if you're with a city and there's a designer asking you a question that you can't answer, please share my information, give it to them. Say, hey, you might can call these guys. I am listed on the SECO's website for Texas as the technical assistance for energy code. You can direct them to the SECO's website and look under technical assistance for the code. I can help with that and assist them with that. If I don't have the right answer, I'll have somebody in a connection that I can actually reach out to get the right answer. So with that, I thank you guys for joining me on this webinar today. I appreciate it. I hope you got some information from it. Just keep in mind, this was a high level. I can help with more detailed stuff. If you want to do a one-on-one or even do a webinar for your office, I can do that as well, or do an in-person training as well. So I'm going to end the recording here in a second. I'll stay on for a few minutes as I'm closing some stuff out. If you want to continue asking questions through the chat, maybe even not related to ComCheck or the 21 Energy Code, by all means, hit me up and we can talk about it. But I'm going to end the recording here. And thanks again for joining us. Appreciate it.